So what does it take for an entire era's art to be called a golden age? I mean, that's a pretty big claim, right? Well, today we're going to dive into India's Gupta period, which spanned from the 4th to the 6th century, to find out exactly how its sculptors managed to achieve a level of perfection that honestly would set the standard for beauty for centuries.
And you'll hear it called that a lot, the golden age of Indian art. And let me tell you, that's not just some fancy hyperbole. It's a title they absolutely earned. They did it by mastering both form and spirit in a way that literally created a new definition of artistic perfection. I mean, we're talking about a standard so incredibly high, it's pretty much been unmatched ever since.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at what the whole golden age idea is all about, then check out the new standard of beauty they came up with. After that, we'll get into the real eye candy, the masterpieces in stone and bronze. And finally, we'll talk about why this all still matters today.
Okay, first up, the Golden Age thesis. You know, what does it even mean to call an artistic period classic? For the Gupta era, it was so much more than just technical skill. It was about finding this sublime balance, a perfect harmony in every single piece they made.
Yeah, you can almost think of it like a perfect fusion of every artistic ingredient. The Gupta artists put it all together to create this visual style that was so incredibly balanced, so harmonious. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. And honestly, it's rarely been seen since. That's what makes it so special.
So the big question is, how on earth did they achieve that perfect harmony? Well, it all kicked off with a completely radical new way of looking at the most basic subject in all of art, the human body.
And really, this is the absolute key to understanding everything. The human form became the sun in their artistic solar system. Everything revolved around it. These artists, they weren't just carving figures. No, they were using the human body as their canvas to explore and define a whole new ideal of beauty.
So what did this new ideal of beauty actually look like? Well, I want you to imagine bodies that feel soft, supple, not stiff and rigid. The artists were going for a texture so smooth it almost looks like it's gleaming. This allowed their figures to move with this incredible, effortless grace, all while being decked out in lavish jewelry and drapery that just makes their form pop.
And one of their most brilliant techniques to show this off was something we call clinging drapery. It's genius, really. They carved the clothing to look translucent, almost like it was damp, so it would cling to the body and reveal the shape underneath. It creates this subtle sense of sensuality for sure, but it was always balanced by this conscious moral awareness. They were masters at suggesting the form without ever being explicit.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but now it's time to see how they actually put it into practice. And we're going to start with their absolute masterpieces in stone.
And wow, just take a look at this. This is one of the most stunning examples you'll ever see. A Buddha carved from red sandstone from a place called Mathura. It dates all the way back to the 5th century. And this single sculpture, it basically has everything that made the Gupta style so revolutionary, all wrapped up in one.
I mean, if you look closely, you can see their whole philosophy right here in the stone. Check out his right hand. It's raised in what's called the Abhaya Mudra, which is a gesture of protection. His face is just so serene, described as being engulfed in spiritual pleasure. And notice the robe, how it clings to his body, but the folds are still carved with this amazing rhythmic precision. And to top it all off, you've got that incredibly intricate halo with all those decorative bands.
But here's a really interesting thing. This Golden Age style wasn't just one single thing. For example, while the sculptures from Mathura, like the one we just saw, have this real sense of columnar rigidity, this powerful stillness, the artists over in Sarnath were doing something different. Their figures are known for their live-inness and movement, this sort of relaxed attitude with a gentle S-curve to the body that just feels so fluid and graceful.
And this artistic revolution wasn't just happening in Mathura and Sarnath. Nope. From the incredible temples at Deogarh and Udayagiri, all the way to the famous Ajanta caves, this new vision of beauty was spreading all across the subcontinent. It just goes to show you how powerful and influential these ideas really were.
Speaking of Deogarh, check this out. This is one of the most famous pieces from the temple there. What you're seeing is the god Vishnu in this state of cosmic sleep. The description is just perfect. He's slumbering wakefully on the snake Ananta, the serpent of eternity. It's such a powerful story, captured in a single moment and carved with just unbelievable elegance.
All right, so they were obviously masters of stone, but the Gupta artists' quest for perfection didn't stop there. They also pushed the boundaries in a whole different medium,
and got absolutely breathtaking results with bronze.
You know, this whole era was a massive leap forward in metalworking, too. This bronze Buddha from a place called Danesquarkera is a fantastic early example of just how skilled they were. Foundries all over North India, particularly in places like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, started casting these amazing serene figures. They were basically translating that ideal they'd perfected in stone into this beautiful gleaming metal.
But if we have to talk about the undisputed masterpiece of Gupta bronze casting, it has to be this one. The magnificent Sultanganj Buddha. I mean, just get a load of this thing. It stands over 2 meters tall. It's this monumental testament to the incredible skill and ambition of these artists. For its time, this was an absolute marvel of casting technology.
Now, to really get this statue, you have to kind of read its symbolism piece by piece. So notice his downcast eyes? That's all about deep contemplation, turning away from the material world. And the long earlobes? They tell a story. They represent a prince who gave up a life of luxury, who literally cast off the heavy, worldly jewels that once stretched his ears. Then you have his robe, the Sangathi, which clings to his body in that classic Gupta way. It's almost invisible. And finally, look at his right hand. That's the Abhaya Mudra again, that timeless gesture of reassurance that says, don't be afraid.
So, after seeing all this, what's the big takeaway? What is the lasting legacy of this incredible period? Why does the art of the Gupta Golden Age still feel so powerful, even today?
When you boil it all down, the true genius of the Gupta artists was their ability to find that perfect, unshakable balance. A balance between the physical body, a deep spiritual feeling, and powerful symbolism. They weren't just making pretty statues. No, they created a classical ideal. They set the benchmark for grace and harmony that would influence Indian art for the next 1,000 years.
And that really leaves us with a pretty deep question to think about, doesn't it? How can a standard of beauty, something that was perfected more than 1,500 years ago, continue to echo through time and influence our own ideas of what's perfect, what's balanced, and what's truly beautiful? It's something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this one.
You know, it's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it, how a single object, something cast in metal hundreds of years ago, can tell this massive story. A story about trade, about religion, and about how ideas flowed across the entire world. Well, today, we're going to unlock the secrets of one of those objects. So take a look at this incredible bronze Buddha. It was found in a place called Fofnar in Maharashtra, India, and it's from way back in the Vakataka period. We're talking around the 5th century CE. It's elegant, it's calm, but believe me, it is so much more than just a beautiful sculpture. This one object is literally a key. It helps us understand how a whole artistic style traveled the ancient world. So, the big question is, what's its story? What can it really tell us?
To get those answers, we've got to look closer. Let's do a little breakdown of the sculpture's anatomy. Because in classical art like this, every single gesture, every fold of clothing, it all has a hidden meaning.
All right, let's start with the right hand. See that? How it's raised up with the palm facing out? That's a very specific gesture, and it's called the Abhaya Mudra. In Sanskrit, Abhaya means fearlessness. So this is a posture of protection, of reassurance, of blessing. It's basically the Buddha saying, hey, don't be afraid. Wow, a really powerful universal message, all captured in one simple pose.
Now, let's look at the artist's unique style, which you can really see in the monk's robe. It's called the Sangathi. It's made to look almost transparent, like it's clinging right to the body. And notice how all the extra fabric is gathered up and held in the left hand. This specific way of showing the drapery, well, that's not a random choice. That's an artistic signature.
So where did this unique artistic signature even come from? I mean, artists don't just create in a vacuum, right? They're always influenced by the people who came before them. To really get this statue, we need to trace its artistic DNA, go back in time a little bit.
And here is where we can see that connection so clearly. The Vakataka style was definitely influenced by an earlier school of art, the Amaravati school, which was popular a few centuries before in southern India. The Amaravati style was all about grace and beauty. But, and this is the key part, the Vakataka artists added their own special twist, that distinctive, body-hugging drapery. They took an idea that was already out there and totally made it their own.
Okay, so we've looked at the statue's features, we've seen its artistic roots, but now we get to the most important question of all. Why did this particular style become so incredibly influential? The answer, honestly, would change the artistic landscape of an entire continent.
And here is a huge clue. This amazing statue, it wasn't found alone. It was discovered as part of a whole group of 7 similar bronze figures. 7! Now that tells us something really important. These weren't just one-off masterpieces, they were being produced in numbers. But why?
And here it is. This is the big aha moment. The secret ingredient was portability. Think about it. Unlike these massive stone carvings that are stuck in one temple forever, these beautiful bronze statues were small and light enough to be easily carried. And that one quality, well, it changed absolutely everything.
This portability is what fueled the spread of an entire artistic movement. It was like going viral, but ancient style. You had Buddhist monks traveling from one place to another, carrying these bronzes for their own personal worship. Then they'd get to a new monastery, a vihara, and install the statue there. And just like that, this refined classical Vakataka style started to travel all across India and even into other countries in Asia.
So when you put all the pieces together, you start to see the incredible power of this idea. It wasn't the giant monuments that changed the face of Asian art. It was these small, portable, and really personal objects.
Ultimately, these bronze Buddhas were so much more than just art. They were vehicles. They carried not just religious devotion, but also a really sophisticated artistic language across huge distances. They literally shaped the cultural and artistic landscape of Asia for centuries, a huge impact from a pretty small object.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought. We live in an age where ideas spread digitally, right? In an instant. But what about physical objects? What are the modern-day equivalents of these bronze Buddhas? The tangible things that are still carrying powerful ideas and culture all across our world today. It's something to think about.
Way up high in the Himalayas, you'll find more than just snow-capped peaks. There's this incredible tradition of artistry that's basically been frozen in time. So today, we're going to dive into the amazing world of Himalayan bronze sculptures. Seriously, this art form is just as mysterious as the mountains where it was born. So these statues have been holding onto their secrets for, centuries. They're this amazing fusion of different cultures, different beliefs, and just a mind-blowing level of skill. But the real question is, right? What makes them so different from everything else being made at the time? Well, that's exactly what we're about to unpack. Every great art form has a story behind it, right? And to really get to the bottom of these bronzes, we've got to go back in time. We need to look at the era that actually brought them to life, a period just buzzing with creativity and new ideas. And we're not talking about some short-lived trend here. No way. This was a full-on golden age that lasted for 3 whole centuries. So picture this. It all kicks off in the 8th century, when the tradition really starts to take hold. Then, over the next 100 years or so, the artists are busy refining their style, getting it just right. And by the time the 10th century rolls around, they are creating the absolute masterpieces that we can still see today. Just incredible. Okay, so that covers the when, but what about the what? What makes these sculptures look the way they do? Let's dig into that and really define what makes this style so distinctive. And this is where things get really interesting. See, if you look at the rest of India at the time, bronze work was all over the place, with tons of different regional styles. But up here in the Himalayas, it was totally different. They had this one super distinctive style. It was consistent, you could spot it a mile away, and get this, it was used for both Hindu and Buddhist gods. That single focused vision is a huge part of what makes this art so special. But come on, a style this powerful and this specific doesn't just pop up out of thin air, right? There's got to be an origin story, some key influence that shaped it. So what was the secret ingredient here? Well, the answer is what's known as the Kashmiri influence. The thinking is that these incredibly skilled artists from Kashmir traveled into the Himalayas and brought their bronze casting traditions with them. And that infusion of know-how and artistic style, that became the secret sauce that gave these sculptures their signature look. All right, so now we get the style and we know where it came from. So let's actually go there, to the very places where the metal was forged and all this magic was created. First stop, the forges of Chamba. It really boils down to 2 main towns that were the epicenters of all this creativity. First up is Chamba, which was like the bustling hub for metal casting. You can just imagine it, right? Full of the smoke from forges and buzzing with master artisans. And then you have Burmore, which was famous for its stunningly decorated temples. These temples became the perfect sacred homes for so many of these amazing works of art. And I want to be super clear about this. The work coming out of these places was absolutely top-notch. I mean, the source material calls it out directly, highlighting the excellent craftsmanship. This wasn't just some hobby. This was technical mastery of the highest possible level. Okay, we've got the history, the style, the locations. I think it's about time we meet the stars of the show, don't you? Let's take a look at some of the actual masterpieces that have survived all these centuries. So let's start our tour in that temple town we mentioned, Barmore. This is where you'll find some of the most legendary bronzes. First up, we have the magnificent bronze of Lakshmi Devi. Just look at that incredible detail. You can really feel this sense of divine grace and quiet power. The whole piece just radiates prosperity and kindness. It's no wonder it's been captivating people for more than 1,000 years. And next, of course, is the iconic sculpture of Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. What I love about this is how the artist managed to capture both his playful side and his deep wisdom. It's just a stunning piece of art, packed with spiritual meaning. And then there's the powerful Narasimha bronze. Wow! This one is all about dynamic, divine energy. It's like the sculptors literally froze a moment of fierce, protective power right there in the metal. It's just a massive testament to their incredible skill. Okay, now let's head over to that metal working hub we talked about, the town of Chamba, because it has its own world-famous treasures to show off. So in Chamba, you'll find the famous Harai bronze. It's thought to be a depiction of Vishnu, and look at that posture. It's so subtle and elegant. It kind of suggests both movement and stillness at the same time. Just a true masterpiece of balance and form. And last, but certainly not least, the absolutely breathtaking Gauri Shankar sculpture. I mean, this intricate portrayal of Shiva and Parvati together, it's just a marvel of composition. The way the two figures are woven together, it just says so much about unity and cosmic harmony. It's beautiful. You know, at the end of the day, words can only go so far. Maybe the source material puts it best, calling them, simply, the wonders of bronze sculptures. And really, what else is there to say? Okay, so let's do a quick wrap-up. What are the key things you should take away from all this? First, this unique art style really flourished between the 8th and 10th centuries. Second, that super distinctive look? That's all thanks to the strong influence from Kashmiri artists. And finally, remember those two towns, Chamba and Barmore? They were the creative hotspots where all the magic happened. And that leaves us with one last kind of tantalizing thought. The incredible pieces we've looked at today are just the ones we know about, the ones that managed to survive all this time. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Tucked away in some remote Himalayan valley, how many other masterpieces like these are still out there, just waiting to be discovered? Thanks so much for joining me on this.
Have you ever looked at an ancient statue and just gotten the feeling that it was trying to tell you something? That underneath all that stone or bronze, there's a story just locked away? Well, today, we're going to decode the secrets of some of the most beautiful sculptures ever made.
So let's just start with this one simple question. What if a statue could actually talk? I mean, look at these figures. They were crafted 1,000 years ago during a forgotten golden age in India, and they have these incredible stories to tell. And today, we're going to learn how to listen.
Okay, so we're traveling back in time to the Pala dynasty. They reigned in eastern India from the 8th all the way to the 12th century. That's 400 years of stability and, yeah, immense wealth. And this wasn't just some political empire. It was an absolute powerhouse of artistic creation, a time when classical art forms were revived and, honestly, perfected.
This era gave birth to what we now call the Palace School of Sculptural Art. Now, what's really cool here is that this wasn't just a copy-paste of older styles. Oh no. The sculptors of Bengal took it to a whole new level of skill and fame, creating a style so distinct that it's now seen as its own unique chapter in Indian art history.
So what makes these objects so physically special? You know, how were they actually made? Well, the magic really starts with the metal itself and an ancient, incredibly detailed process.
The technique is called the lost wax method. It's amazing. First, artists would sculpt a perfect, super detailed model, entirely out of wax. Then they'd cover the whole thing in clay and heat it up. The wax would melt out, leaving this perfect, hollow impression inside. Then they pour in molten metal, and once it cools, they just break away the clay and boom, a single seamless bronze masterpiece.
And the metal they used, it was extraordinary. It was a sacred alloy called ashtadhatu, which means octoalloy. By combining 8 specific metals, the artist created a material that wasn't just durable, it was symbolically powerful.
This specific blend gave the sculptures what's been called a weighty sensuality, this unique physical presence that just makes them feel more real, more divine.
Okay, so now we know how they were made, but let's talk about who they were making. The artists were drawing from this incredibly rich tapestry of spiritual beliefs. Now, while the inspiration was definitely mainly Buddhist, the Pala artists sculpted a whole pantheon of figures. You see the Buddha, of course, and also bodhisattvas. These are beings who have achieved enlightenment but choose to stick around on Earth to help others. You also see powerful goddesses like Tara, who became really popular with Vajrayana Buddhism, and even major Hindu deities like Vishnu and Ganesh.
And this right here perfectly illustrates their range. On the left, you've got the Buddhist goddess Tara. See those slim, elegant features? That's classic Pala style. But then, on the right, you have a really complex Hindu sculpture that's just buzzing with detail and energy. These artists were absolute masters of multiple traditions.
But here's where we get to the heart of it. We've looked at the material, we've looked at the subjects, but the true secret, the language of these statues, it's been hidden in plain sight this whole time. It is all in the hands.
These hand gestures are called mudras, and you can really think of it as a kind of divine sign language. Each pose has a very specific meaning, a message that's being sent from the deity across 1,000 years directly to you. Once you learn to read them, the whole statue just starts to speak.
First up, we have the Abhaya Mudra. This one is the gesture of fearlessness, of protection, of reassurance. It's pretty much the deity saying, hey, don't be afraid, I've got your back.
And here it is in practice. This Buddha is holding his hand in that Abhaya Mudra. This is the exact gesture he's said to have made right after achieving enlightenment. It's just a powerful symbol of inner strength and total peace.
Next is one of the most famous gestures of all, the Bhumisparsha Mudra. The name literally means touching the earth, and its message is calling the earth to witness the truth.
This captures such a critical moment. The Buddha is sitting under the Bodhi tree, and he's being tempted by demons. So to prove he had the right to enlightenment, he just reaches down and touches the ground, calling the earth itself to be his witness. This gesture isn't just about a story. It symbolizes this unwavering resolve and the final victory over all doubt.
Okay, let's move on to the Dhyana Mudra. Now this one you'll probably recognize. It's the classic gesture of meditation, and it represents absolute concentration and achieving spiritual perfection.
You see how both hands are resting in the lap, palms up? This gesture creates this kind of circle of calm energy. It represents that deep peace and balance the Buddha found during his final meditation under the Bodhi tree.
And finally, we have the Dharmachakra Mudra. Now, this is a two-handed gesture that literally means turning the wheel of the Dharma, or the cosmic law. It's the gesture of teaching.
This mudra represents the Buddha's very first sermon. It happened in the deer park of Sarnath, where he set his teachings, that wheel of the law, in motion for the first time ever. It's the moment wisdom is finally shared with the rest of the world.
So this incredible artistic language, it didn't just stay in Bengal. Its influence spread far and wide, carried along by trade routes and religious faith.
The distinctive Pala style, with its elegant forms and all that deep meaning, it basically became a kind of international artistic language. It was adopted and then adapted by artists all across Asia, carried by pilgrims and scholars from Nepal and Tibet all the way to Southeast Asia.
And you know, this didn't happen by accident. This was a formal school of art, a recognized standard of excellence. These great centers of learning, like the legendary Nalanda University, they were basically the crucibles where these techniques were taught, perfected, and passed on, cementing the Pala legacy for centuries to come.
We started by asking, what if a statue could talk? Well, now you know a few words of their language. You can tell the difference between a gesture of teaching and one that's calling the earth to witness. So, the next time you're in a museum, what stories will you see?
Today, we're going to do something pretty amazing. We're going on a journey through 5,000 years of history, but we're not going to read it in a book. We're going to see it told in stone and in bronze. We're going to trace the incredible story of Indian sculpture, all the way from these simple, ancient little figures to the magnificent cosmic gods who literally dance the universe into existence. And really, this is the big question, isn't it? What can a silent object tell us? Well, turns out a whole lot. We're not just looking at art here. We're basically on an archaeological quest, decoding the messages and the beliefs that ancient civilizations left behind for us. These sculptures, they're our clues. They are our most direct link to the past. And our quest kicks off right here with this little bronze figurine. I mean, she's only about 4 inches tall, but wow, is she striking. This is the famous dancing girl, found in Mohenjo-Daro, and she's from around 2500 BCE. Just look at that pose. The hand on the hip, that confident, relaxed posture. She is one of the very first, and maybe one of the most iconic, sculptures ever found on the subcontinent. So her story takes us to our first major stop, the Harappan era. We're talking about the ancient Indus Valley civilization, one of the world's very first complex urban societies. And what just blows my mind is that even 5,000 years ago, in these brand new cities, the artists were already complete masters of their craft. I mean, they weren't just messing around with clay. They were sculpting incredible things out of terracotta, carving stone, and even casting these super intricate figures in bronze. You know that cool, confident pose that the dancing girl has? Well, it actually has a name. It's called Tribhanga. It's a classic posture where the body bends in 3 places, usually the neck, the waist, and the knee. It creates this really graceful and dynamic S-curve that, trust me, you're going to see over and over again in Indian art. But hold on a second. How on earth did they create such a detailed metal figure thousands of years ago? It wasn't magic. It was an incredibly sophisticated piece of technology, a secret technique that allowed their art to last for millennia. And that secret is the lost wax technique. It's this complex, multi-step process for making hollow metal sculptures, and it is so ingenious that people still use variations of it to this day. So let's take a quick look at how it works. The process itself is just brilliant. First, the artist sculpts the entire figure perfectly in beeswax. Then, they cover that wax model completely in clay, making a mold. When they heat the whole thing up, the wax melts and just pours out, leaving a perfect, hollow image of the sculpture inside the clay. Then, you pour molten bronze into that cavity, let it cool, and finally, you break the clay mold, revealing a perfect metal copy inside. Absolutely genius, right? Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. After the Harappans, we enter a period of massive empires, starting around the 3rd century BCE. And this is when sculpture gets monumental. And for the very first time, artists start to give human form to their gods. Check this out. This is the Didurganch Yakshi, a life-sized figure from the Mauryan period. She's a nature spirit, carved from sandstone and then polished until it shines like glass. She represents what we call popular art, meaning she wasn't some official statue for the king, she was a figure of worship for the everyday people. Now, as these empires grew and started interacting with other cultures, something really fascinating started to happen in the art world. Different, distinct artistic schools began to pop up across the subcontinent, and each one had its own totally unique way of picturing one of the most important figures of all, the Buddha. I mean, just look at the difference here. It's like night and day. On the left, you have a Buddha from the Gandhara region. He looks like a Greek god, right? With the wavy hair and the flowing robes. That's a direct influence from Greco-Roman art. But then on the right, you have the Mathura style, which is completely homegrown. It's a much more powerful, stylized figure based on older images of local nature spirits called yakshas. So let's break this down. In Gandhara, you've got that Greco-Roman vibe, and they used this bluish-gray sandstone. Over in Mathura, the style is totally indigenous, and their signature material was this beautiful dotted red sandstone. And then you had a third major school, Amaravati, which used white marble to create these really slender figures that seemed to be just full of movement. 3 different regions, 3 different kinds of stone, and 3 completely different visions of the Buddha. So all this incredible artistic evolution eventually brings us to what many people consider the classical peak, the absolute zenith of Indian art. From the 4th to the 6th centuries, the Gupta era ushered in what we now call a golden age of artistic perfection. So what makes it a golden age? Well, the Gupta artists they nailed it. They found this perfect, beautiful balance between realism and idealism. Their sculptures have these soft, smooth forms that seem to flow effortlessly, and they just radiate this deep sense of spiritual grace right out of the stone. This Buddha from Sarnath is the perfect example. Just notice the drapery. It's carved so finely that it looks transparent, like it's clinging to the body. But the real defining feature, it's the face. That expression of complete serenity, of deep inner peace and meditation, that right there is the hallmark of the Gupta style. And that hand gesture is really important. It's not just a random pose. It's called the Abhayuma Mudra. That raised right hand is a symbol. It's a divine gesture that says to the person looking at it, do not be afraid. It's a promise of protection and fearlessness. All right, so from that golden age, we're going to leap forward into the medieval period, starting around the 8th century. And this is where powerful regional kingdoms, especially in eastern and southern India, took sculpture to these crazy new heights of dynamic and divine expression. Over in eastern India, you had the Pala school, and they really carried the torch of that classical Gupta tradition. They were absolute masters of bronze, creating these incredibly elegant, detailed, and almost sensual figures that captured that same feeling of grace. But it was down in the south, under the Chola dynasty, that bronze sculpture reached its absolute peak. And it gave us this, the Nataraja, Shiva as the Lord of the Dance. This is widely considered one of the greatest masterpieces of Indian art. And believe me, it is so much more than just a statue. It's a profound statement about the entire cosmos. So let's quickly unpack all the symbolism that is packed into this one single figure. The little drum in his upper right hand, that beats the rhythm of creation itself. The fire in his left hand is the force of destruction. We see that familiar raised hand promising fear not, while another hand points the way to salvation. And look down, beneath his foot, he's crushing a dwarf who symbolizes ignorance. It's the entire cycle of life, death, and rebirth, all captured in one single powerful cosmic dance. For thousands of years, sculpture had a job to do. It was for religion, it was for recording history. But this quote really highlights a huge shift. Today, sculpture is largely defined as a work of self-expression. That's a fundamental change in the entire reason we create art. And that brings us to one last thought. We've seen how art has been a record of faith, of power, of philosophy for millennia. It really is an unbroken 5,000-year conversation in stone and metal. So the question for us is, thousands of years from now, what story is our art going to tell about our world?
All right, let's jump right in. We're going to travel back to medieval India, an era that is just full of the most amazing contradictions. You see, it was a time of unbelievable artistic creation, and at the same time, widespread destruction. Today, we're going to unravel this incredible paradox of its religious sculpture. So, on one hand, you have this period of intense destruction. Invading armies are tearing down enormous amounts of existing religious art. But then on the other hand, and this is the wild part, at the exact same time, the creation of new religious sculpture is just exploding. It's flourishing. These two things, creation and destruction, are happening side by side.
So this leads us to the big question, right? It's a real head-scratcher. How is that even possible? I mean, how could artists and patrons find the resources, the safety, let alone the motivation, to create new sacred art when so much was being destroyed all around them? It just doesn't seem to add up.
Well, the answer, in a single word, is geography. The heart of this creative explosion wasn't everywhere. It was concentrated in one key region, the South.
And we're not just talking about survival here. This was a full-blown renaissance. Down in the South, temple art wasn't just hanging on by a thread. Oh no, it was evolving, it was growing, and it was reaching spectacular new heights. So let's dig into how it actually thrived.
The art itself took on these massive, incredible new forms. Temple complexes started featuring these absolutely towering gateways, called gopurams, just covered from top to bottom in huge sculpted figures. Inside, you'd find these vast, high-ceilinged halls built to welcome crowds of visitors. And we also see these unique miniature towers popping up, which became a real signature of the style of that time.
And to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about, check this out. Just imagine walking into a temple and being greeted by a row of life-size horses rearing up, all carved out of solid rock. This wasn't some small, delicate artwork. No way. This was powerful, jaw-dropping sculpture, and it was designed to inspire complete and utter awe. Okay, so we've seen what they were building, and it was clearly epic. But the next logical question is, how? How on earth did they do it? Let's get into the sculptor's craft and look at the ingenuity, the materials, and the techniques that made all this possible.
So the artisans of the Vijayanagara Empire, a huge power in the south, they primarily used two types of stone. Early on, they loved soapstone. And why not? It's soft, it's pretty easy to carve, you can get all that fine detail. But later, they made a major shift to the local hard granite. And let me tell you, that change created a whole new world of problems.
See, granite is a tough customer. It's incredibly hard, which is great for longevity, but it's also flaky. It chips away, and it just refuses to hold that fine, smooth detail that you can get with soapstone. Suddenly, these master sculptors couldn't achieve that same level of perfection they were used to. They had a real material problem on their hands.
But did they give up? Of course not. They came up with this absolutely brilliant three-step workaround. First, they'd carve the big, basic shape out of the stubborn granite. Then, to fix that rough, flaky surface, they'd cover the whole thing in a layer of plaster, creating this perfectly smooth canvas. And for the grand finale, they'd paint that plaster with these incredible, vibrant colors, bringing the whole sculpture to life. Genius!
But why? Why go through all this trouble? The new materials, the new techniques? What was the ultimate point of all these magnificent sculptures? Well, to get that, you have to stop seeing this as just decoration. You have to see it as a sacred text.
You know, in India, sculpture wasn't just one form of creative expression. For a long time, it was the preferred form. These weren't just statues of gods to be looked at. The way the human forms were abstracted, they were intentionally designed to be visual lessons. They were a way to teach the core stories and principles of Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism to absolutely everyone, whether you could read or not. They were basically sermons in stone.
And this incredible tradition didn't just stop in the medieval era. It's a legacy that's still so powerful, which really makes you think, doesn't it? How do these ancient forms of expression, born from this crazy time of destruction and creation, continue to shape faith, culture, and society even now? It's a powerful legacy, written in stone, that is absolutely still alive today.